Hello and welcome. Thank you all for being here today. I'm Nick Kanoki, the Director of Technology for the Asset Leadership Network, and I'm very excited for this conversation today with Jack Dempsey, Director of Definitive Logic, as well as ALN Senior Fellow and Board of Directors member, and more. And we'll get into that in just a moment here. But first, we want to thank patron members, including Definitive Logic, and our other organizational members that really help make everything we do here at the ALN possible. So thanks for their continued support. And on that note, we want to thank Andrew James Advisory Group for being a member and promote their upcoming A55K professional certification course. I believe that's starting October 24th. And if you're interested or think some of your colleagues could benefit from some of that type of professional development, please reach out to Lindsay Ziegler at the Andrew James Advisory Group, or anyone here at the ALN can get you in touch. And one more plug before we get underway for our upcoming event, September 16th, a culture of value, sustainable infrastructure, and that will be at the National Academy of Sciences in Washington, D.C., an in-person event, and we know you're all itching to get back to those in-person events. And so we hope to see you there. You can register on our website. And with that, I will welcome Mike Bordenero, ALN Executive Director, on, and let him take us away. Mike, are you there? I see you now.
Thank you, Nick. How are things in Lander, Wyoming today?
Oh, can't complain. It's a balmy day at the beaches of Wyoming. Actually,
well, thank you for
it's unusual for summer in Wyoming, but so it is.
Good. Chicago is enjoying surprisingly good weather while the rest of the world burns and floods. I feel embarrassed to be enjoying nice days, but that's why we're talking about sustainable infrastructure. We actually know we can do something about improving our infrastructure and the effects of weather on our environments, especially our built environment. And Nick is right. It's always exciting to talk with Jack Dempsey. Jack introduced me to the Asset Leadership Network, and I'm forever grateful for that. And the Asset Leadership Network introduced Jack to Definitive Logic. So there was a bit of a payback there. And we're going to be talking with Jack about just a few things. We could talk for hours with Jack Dempsey. He's a wealth of knowledge. And we're focusing on how Definitive Logic sees the asset management industry at this time. There's been a lot going on. And Jack's involved in so many things, including the rewriting the ISO 55000 document. He's very active in the Society of American Military Engineers. He's on the Board of Infrastructure and Constructed Environment, which is writing a book, which is coming out soon, and a paper for the National Institute of Science and Technology. Quite a bit going on. So welcome back, Jack. It's always good talking. And just want to start with, it's been a while. So how does Definitive Logic see the asset management industry these days?
Well, first of all, Mike, it's always a pleasure talking to you and to ALN. I mean, it's a great mission that you guys are performing, sharing information and getting people to share more things about asset management. So it's kind of you jogged some memory there on how the paths kind of intertwine in terms of meeting one another, and of course, both working here with Asset Leadership Network. So I'm Jack Dempsey. I'm a director at Definitive Logic, and the company that I work with focuses on digital transformation, and the practice that I'm part of specializes in the application of digital transformation in the asset management area. So we're finding in the industry there's a tremendous appetite for the convergence of digital transformation and asset management. I've been with Definitive Logic for 5 years. Each of those years, we've grown 20% year over year, responding to that demand. So it's pretty exciting what's going on right now in terms of clients, particularly agencies within the federal government, have lots of assets, are trying to figure out how to pull that together, are becoming more sophisticated in understanding of data and information requirements, and are just trying to really get down to basic management activity. So there's a lot of demand in the marketplace, and it's pretty exciting to be part of that right now today.
We have been seeing that leadership, the role leadership needs to take is to establish a culture of asset management. That's becoming really clear. That's different than the managing of the assets, and we're trying to establish that. Do you see that occurring? Do you see that recognition happening?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of, a number of things, and you kind of listed them out. I'm active at the National Academies on the Board of Infrastructure and Constructed Environment, supporting a number of different studies that are going on there. Likewise, also active internationally with the ISO Technical Committee 251, which is in charge of basically updating the 55,000 series standard. This topic is found in all those locations, plus with all the clients that we're working with. One of the questions that's coming up is asset management a philosophy, or is it a methodology? And that's kind of a neat question, but I think it really speaks to the more basic point that you're raising. Is it's really about developing an asset management culture. And the way every organization goes through that is a little bit different. Everybody has a little bit of a different culture. If you run two railroads, you're going to have a different culture in different organizations. So that's a big question today, and a lot of people are trying to figure that out. What's really exciting to see is as people are asking that question, asset managers are asking that questions of their organizations. They're starting to recognize it's not just about a formula or a software product or a strategic asset management plan. It really is how do we enable people? And that kind of highlights the importance of leadership and culture. And I think some of the leading organizations today are focusing on problem solving from that perspective.
Excellent. Our history actually goes back to the early 2000s when, under the direction of Admiral Thad Allen, you were preaching mission-focused operations through the Coast Guard. And it took me a couple times seeing your presentation it started with a slide of someone being lifted out of the water with a life ring being hoisted up to a helicopter. And you would say, this is our mission. We save people's lives every day. If you're not helping us save people's lives, you're extraneous to our mission and don't need to be part of it. Get yourself aligned with our mission. And it took a while, but that mission of focus really breaks down barriers, personalities, divisions, siloed thinking. Because when you're focused on mission, does it help the mission or doesn't it? And then act.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I had the pleasure of working as an officer in the Coast Guard, mission oriented. I'm a civil engineer by training. I loved everything I did. But as I grew up becoming an engineer and understanding how I could be a professional and serve the Coast Guard and basically operators in that capacity, I started to understand more and more that assets are really there for a purpose. And to understand that purpose is critical to solving problems. So this point is kind of manifests itself in many ways, and I think it will continue to do so over the decades. Recently, the ISO committee developed a report, or actually it's an article. It's available online. Managing assets in the context of asset management. And that report tried to highlight the fact that there's a difference between, what you do to an asset and what an asset does for you. And, if you're serving a consumer, a stakeholder, Coast Guard, it would be mission operators. If you're at a college, you're ultimately serving the students or the research entities that are dependent on that university to perform the work that they're doing. So the more you as an asset manager understand that relationship, the more effective you can be in terms of making best use of limited resources and making risk-based investment decisions. And so it's kind of a journey. Everybody kind of learns it in their own way, but I think it's central to the asset management view of things. It's essential in terms of how ISO 55000 views things. So I think that's why that standard is helpful to many organizations, understanding these interrelationships and ultimately making good investment decisions related to their assets.
Can you give us a little view of how the ISO 55000 set of documents is being refined and evolving?
Yeah, so I'll submit. It's a standard. In writing standards, some people love that. I find it's challenging. It forces you to ask very deep questions. Sometimes it's just about the definition of a word. So it's not for everyone, but what it has for me anyway is uncovered, what are the prime movers behind asset management. There's a sentence in ISO 55000 today. To me, I think it sums up the entire purpose of the standards. It basically says asset management is not about assets. It's about managing the value generated by assets. So once you understand it's really about value generation, it kind of changes things. So as the ISO committee is evolving or revising the standards based on almost a decade of feedback coming back on their use in the public sector, there's a lot of opportunities to make some improvements there. And that's one thing that is emerging is, a management system isn't kind of like a one-trick pony, an asset management system. It's actually part of a collective management system. And it's highlighting the fact that there's a context that enables asset management, or sometimes called asset management system thinking, in terms of focusing on both the life cycle of the assets, maintenance, planning, capital, capital projects, and also the coordination of management activities, which is really the efficiency of an organization to best serve its purpose. So that aspect is very alive in the development of the standard, and trying to not just clarify, but also simplify understandings about that. And I think as the standards get developed, they should be out in about 1.5 years or so. I think they'll make pretty substantial progress in simplifying the message that the standards and ultimately asset management is trying to deliver.
Excellent. And you're really quite the leader. You're taking a strong position with the National Academy of Sciences, which, by the way, you introduced us to, so thank you for that also. And it's where we're having our event called A Culture of Value, Sustainable Infrastructure. So can you tell us what you're doing with the National Academy?
Sure, it's another kind of deep thinking place. I'm involved in the National Academies on the Board of Infrastructure and Constructed Environment, also known as BICE. So it's a senior board there whose mission is to advise the legislative and executive branches on matters related to physical infrastructure. And purpose of that board is to perform studies or to evaluate different questions that the legislative or executive branch might have. Currently, I'm active on 2 studies. One is kind of more of a broad strategic study. It's titled Strategies to Renew Federal Facilities. It's basically taken a critical look at the last 20 years of policy that's been developed. Many of the people who here would be familiar with Executive Order 13327, which is really kind of set the stage for modern real property asset management in the federal government. And there's been a number of things that have happened in terms of GPRA, Government Performance Results Act, a number of other, more recently also the Federal Property Management Reform Act of 2016 that are all starting to coalesce policy around there. So this study is really going to look at how that study is doing, and opportunities for the federal government, specifically federal agencies, to make better use of limited dollars. The report should be out here in a matter of a month or so. It's been a long time coming. It will have a number of different recommendations in there. And, without giving anything away, a very influential source for that was the recent GAO study, 1957, which basically took a serious look at ISO 55000, its application to federal agencies, and provided some recommendations and a framework of how federal agencies can better manage their assets. So that's one study. I'm pretty excited. Looking forward to that one coming out. The second study is more of a tactical study looking at NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And it's specifically looking at the relationship facilities have to NIST performing its mission, which is a pretty exciting and actually critical mission to all America. I mean, they define how things get measured. This is very important for any aspect of commerce. So they remember the Department of Commerce, but things that involve like 5G, spectrums and how that's going to fit into the marketplace, to the definition of a kilogram, and more immediately, the criteria of how to develop the technology and manage the technology in terms of enabling production and commerce capabilities in the semiconductor industry. So we're all familiar how semiconductors right now is a limited resource. There's international vulnerabilities to sourcing and producing semiconductors that are going to impact and are impacting the U.S. capability. So this is at a center point of basically focusing on that. This study will cover many things, but an aspect of it will also tell the story of how facilities enable that to happen, which ultimately supports America's competitiveness in this world. So that'll be an exciting study coming out maybe later on this year that really is an asset management story, and will kind of bring some things together. So yes, there's a lot of work going on in national academies. A lot of it is specifically about the advancement of asset management.
And thank you also for the introduction to the U.S. Government Accountability Office. You put some bugs in some ears that helped generate that report, and Nick put up a link to that report in the chat, so if anybody is interested in that. And we've got people from the U.S. Government Accountability Office speaking at our event on September 16th, which brings us to culture of value, sustainable infrastructure. And so with all this background of all the things you're doing, how do you see the event coming up and promoting this culture of value that you say is so important to the ISO 55000 approach to asset management, and then how this might help us actually build back better? David Topman was talking with us in our planning committee recently, and he said, I wish it was build back better, but it's looking like build back the same. And that's because the legislation doesn't have any requirements for asset management plans or strategic asset management plans. But we know from our connections to federal executives that they are overlaying an asset management structure on their disbursement of billions of dollars through the IIJA and other infrastructure acts.
Well,
so
I guess
that was a long way of saying,
yeah. Yeah, no, kind of, I guess a couple thoughts about that. One, I mean, there's really no mystery to asset management. I mean, asset management is just making good use of your next dollar. And, we've all been part of teams that we felt like really like kind of clicked, like understood what the problem was, understood what everybody could contribute to solving that problem, worked well together, and kind of helped one another out making things happen. And ultimately, that's what asset management is trying to do within the federal government. Now, it's looking specifically through the lens of assets. So it's not solving all the problems that the federal government might have. But when it looks at when you have stuff, assets, and those assets are there to serve a purpose, as an investor, you want to return an investment. So ultimately, what's really trying to go on here is if you have a system that kind of understands the consequences of decisions, understands how to make things work, it kind of clicks, and it just feels right. What we can recognize now in a lot of the policies, and the National Academy studies will kind of reflect this. There'll be a critical analysis in the strategies report. Is current policy doesn't really support that, even though the words are there, the activities are there, but things like the federal budgeting process that looks at a short-term focus, which is okay and supports the probably imminent threats, providing also future flexibility, is a good process. But when it comes to long-lived assets, it's sometimes hard to understand the consequences of decisions being made, meaning if we're not doing enough sustainment or maintenance on these long-lived assets, it ultimately would be more expensive in the long run. So there's balance points that need to be figured out, and there's a lot of smart people that are doing that. I mean, I really do compliment the work that GAO is doing in terms of recognizing opportunities to do that. And I think that's also reflected in OMB's leadership in trying to get the right policy into place. So there's a lot of good work going on here, but ultimately, in terms of your point on sustainment and culture, it really is going to help build around, are we working in an organization that clicks? Does it understand the consequences and implications of the decisions that we're making today and the relationship to the goals that we want in the future? I mean, there's a lot of debate about, climate change. I don't think anybody disagrees that the climate is changing. And I don't think there's a lot of disagreement the fact that humans do cause and can impact negatively things of that nature. So the sustainability, kind of mantra, I think it is really good. It's asset management would focus on, are we understanding these implications in the decisions that we're making today? And as an organization, do we understand what we're doing today and its implications downrange, which is, I would submit, critical, especially when you're an organization that has a lot of long-lived assets, real property, transportation assets, a lot of your capital assets are very long-lived, and it's going to be better for all of us and across the generations the more we understand these relationships and can make better risk-based decisions on how we're doing things today.
And a culture of asset leadership is necessary to help initiate the responses to those changing climate conditions. What do you think of the role of education and training in establishing a culture of asset leadership?
Well, well, first of all, it's critical, absolutely critical, and there's definitely a crawl, walk, run. Two insights to share that kind of, I think, frame the argument. One is, one of the topics of conversation in the development or the revision of the ISO standards is the relationship between asset management principles and asset management requirements. Today in ISO 55000, we have fundamentals, value, alignment, leadership, and assurance are recognized as fundamentals to asset management. And they're evolving in the thought process today. In ISO 55001, we have requirements, which kind of say, this is how you need a facility, these are management techniques or management activities that need to happen to be effective in managing assets. So there's something of a yin-yang relationship between requirements and principles. Requirements help you do things right, and principles help you do the right thing. When you have them in harmony, you're becoming really effective. So that's kind of part one. One of the questions at hand is, well, what's the relationship between 55,000, this broader asset management view, and 55,001, which is more kind of, by the numbers type of thing. And I think one of the things that's emerging is the difference is in 55,001, it's requirements about management activities that need to be performed. Do you know your stakeholders? Do you have conversations with them? Do you understand their requirements and needs and how assets support them? Things of that nature are part of the requirement structure. When you get into principles, it's, well, what happens outside of that? And really what we've found is there's three things that happen outside of the management system, asset management system. It's principles, leadership, and culture. And ultimately, it really distills down to principled leadership. So through principled leadership and understanding the balance points, understanding the risks and needs of all the stakeholders, you end up with a basis of principles. And principles, or I mean, well, principled leadership, you end up with a culture of asset management, a caring in terms of how you're going to manage those assets and understand the relationship those assets have. So that's kind of a little bit more on the theoretical side, on the standard side, big picture. But a story I have also that I think really kind of sums it up in terms of how it really crystallized for me. I have a mentor, Doug Christensen. He's passed away a few years ago. He was a professor and a maintenance manager at Brigham Young University. And as I was coming up through the grade, learning about asset management, I came to meet him, and he was just a fantastic guy. And I know many people in the industry really know him, and he's just a class act. Actually worked with him a number of years at APA, developing a standard and actually authoring a book with him there. But I went out to visit him one day, and I was really excited about seeing like kind of where asset management began from a capital requirement. And Brigham Young, like many universities, is an iconic place, and they want to look nice, and they want to attract students and researchers, and it has to look good. And there's a business side to that. The people who run the place say, we don't have a lot more money, but we know we can do better. Do you have any ideas? And they developed a systematic approach for asset management, which was, everybody's involved. Everybody can save, can do the right thing. It's kind of like safety. Everybody's a safety observer. He took me to the grounds maintenance facility, which is way in the back. Nobody ever goes there. And the ground maintenance foreman, he said, tell Jack about your story on the weed whackers. And he told me this he's really excited. He goes, there's a weed whacker I want to buy. It's $750, and it's a better weed whacker, but procurement would say I had to buy this $200 model. I didn't like it. It failed. It just didn't do the job, and I had to buy more of those, and it cost more money than the 750 version. And he went through the process of how he developed an economic analysis and made all that work. And I was like, yeah, that's asset management. That sounds really good. Doug and I were walking out of the facility, and what he said to me was really the story that kind of brought it all together. He goes, that gentleman never graduated high school. He doesn't have a higher level degree. What we're doing here is developing an asset management culture that allows everybody to understand opportunities where they can contribute to make things better, make the outcome better, and understand their relationship to supporting the mission. And when he said that, it really kind of galvanized it for me on that's what asset management is really trying to do. It's to focus and establish an asset management culture. And it's really exciting to see at lots of different levels across organizations at the standard level internationally, that the industry, I think, is really starting to wake up to that aspect. So it's exciting to see, your sustainability culture is echoing that effect. And I think more good things will happen as we all understand those interrelationships and understand the importance of an asset management culture.
Well, thank you, Jack. I asked about education, and you provided an education in a very concise way. That was very good. And they were practicing, many of the principles of ISO 55000, involve all relevant stakeholders, and have a strategic asset management plan. That was great. We could talk all day, and I would love to, but we'll save that for September 16th when we're together in person. And I'll just say thank you for joining us. This year we're going to be much more concise and precise on our 30-minute ALN Thursday at 3. And so we'll bring Nick in to close us out. And thank you again, Jack.
You're welcome. It's always a pleasure.
Okay, and with that, I just want to thank our patron members, especially Definitive Logic, for Jack Dempsey's participation here today and continued participation in our events in the future, including September 16th. And I'll thank all our organizational members for making ALN Thursdays at 3 possible. And again, our upcoming event, which we hope to see you all at on September 16th at the National Academy of Sciences in Washington, D.C. We can talk more about a culture of value, how to establish it, the benefits and value, and sustainable infrastructure being the lens. And then quickly, just one more plug for the Andrew James Advisory Group's course starting on October 24th, A55K professional certification. So please get involved. And we, again, hope to see you in person on September 16th, and you can register on our website.
And thank you to all of the attendees. We appreciate your support. And if there's any person you would like us to talk with at ALN Thursday at 3, please reach out to me, Nick, Jim, or anyone at the ALN. We appreciate your interest, and thank you for attending. And thanks again, Jack. Great talking.
Absolutely.
See you, Nick.